Hey there, Wargamers, and welcome back to another video. Right off the bat, I'm just going to apologize for the lighting in this room. Unfortunately, due to hardware limitations, the lighting is kind of all over the map depending on what time of day I do this at, and unfortunately it's a little bit later, it's a little bit overcast, so the light is all over the place. But that's besides the point. You guys didn't turn on this video to listen to me rant about light. I'm going to rant about other things, namely 8th edition once again, and holy jumping, has it just been a deluge of information coming out this week. It's been really exciting. I'm really excited about what's coming out, how Gamesworkshop is addressing things, and the more information we're seeing, the more apparent it is that they have in fact been taking to heart what the community has been saying and what their what's the word, consultants have been saying in the form of the guys from like Nova, Adepticon, and Frontline Gaming and whatnot. So very promising, very promising. The stuff I want to talk about today is three of the big things that have come out this week. We've seen weapon profiles, we've seen unit profiles, and they've talked a little bit about movement. And this is all very exciting stuff because it adds a lot of interesting dynamics to the game that I really like. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they actually operate in the game itself. The first one I'm going to talk about is actually going to be the movement, so it's actually the most recent one to come out. And yeah, they're talking about, you know, the movement stat, which we've already seen. Which first off, I'm all for. I always think that it was a little silly to remove that in the first place. I definitely think that that a lowly guardsman would be moving a little bit slower than a super powered space marine or a very nimble elder aspect warrior. So seeing that come back is really nice. Now, obviously, with the rules as they currently are, there's going to have to be some tweaking. Otherwise, we're going to see some really big shenanigans, especially with Eldar. But the way things are going, I think we're definitely going to see that. But it means that your movement phase is going to be a much more important phase to the game. You're actually going to have to think about where you're going, how many turns it's going to have to be to get there. And more importantly, you're going to have to think a little bit more about range bands, which is kind of an interesting thing that we haven't seen for a while. Because, I mean, if you only have a movement of 4, and the suggestions are right now that Terminators are going to have a much lower movement rate. I actually have a whole bunch of the things up right here. Yeah, like Terminators have a 5-inch movement versus a 6-inch movement of Space Marines in power armor. So, you know, that's going to make a big difference. It's going to mean that we are going to have to rely a little bit more on transports just in general, unless of course you have a super fast model. But yeah, really interesting. The other interesting thing that they brought up when it came to moving around the field and whatnot is you can now disengage from assault. And this one is huge, actually, because, I mean, as anyone who has played the game, even casually over the past couple editions, Death Stars and tar pits have become big issues. You can have a massively destructive unit that you can't escape from until you just get destroyed, or you can have that same massively destructive unit who just sits there and gets tar pitted because somebody decided to throw 50 boys at it, or a platoon blob of guardsmen, and they just sit there for the game. And I mean, that's boring, that's dull. So the ability to be able to disengage is first off really big for that one. It improves the flow of the game. It ensures that you have more control over the fights that you're picking, and it also means that you don't want to throw all your eggs into a single basket, because then you're being kited around the entire game. The other really cool thing about this is that even though you have the stipulation that you can't advance, you can't shoot, or you can't charge on the turn that you disengage from a combat, what it does do is it opens up that unit back to shooting. So something like a fighting withdrawal is actually a viable option. And I'm sure any players who play highly focused shooting armies are going to love that. So Tau, Guard, that sort of stuff. And that's fantastic. That's going to add a really interesting dynamic to the game that I'm really excited about. So yeah, going forward, I really hope that we can see some more exciting things in that regard. The next up, I'm going to talk about some of the stats that we've seen come out. And the one thing I'm going to say that I'm really happy about is they did not take away strength and toughness. One of my big complaints about Age of Sigmar was that too many things were simplified Now, granted, this is again going back to when Age of Sigmar first came out. But the removal of strength and toughness in favor of simply for a fixed to hit and a fixed to wound roll, it took a little bit away from the game. I think it made beefier things, even though there was a lot of really good changes made to big monstrous creatures and whatnot. It made them feel a little bit more frail. So keeping the strength and toughness chart, at least the strength and toughness, we don't know how the chart's going to look yet. I'm really happy about that one because it means that there is still an importance of a higher toughness or higher strength, and it means that things like transports, which are now going to be getting a more standard stat line, remain relevant. This one's a little bit hard for me to actually voice just how much I'm really liking that that's still around. But to me, it keeps a little bit more of the complexity that we like in 40k without simplifying things a little bit too much. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we see any new chart progress, what they decide to put into it, and how they decide to make everything interact with it. So very, very excited about that one as well. We also saw some things get some tweakings in their stats. Terminators are now 2 wounds, which really good. If there's instant death and you can be double tapped out, that doesn't really address the issue of Terminators without a point decrease, but it is a good first start, and I'm going to withhold judgment until we actually see the full rules come out, because my fears might not even be warranted at this point. We could see the removal of instant death completely, maybe in favor of like the mortal wound system that they have in Age of Sigmar, but right now that's a really good start. The other thing that I really like, and just forgive my lack of eye contact right now, and I already mentioned it, is vehicles are getting a more standard stat line as well. And the one they presented was the Dreadnought. That one's really good. That's actually a discussion and something I've been championing for years as far as what they need to do for vehicles. They needed to get away from armor values and replace it with a stat line. Because the big problem with armor values and vehicles, that monstrous creatures, gargantuan creatures, that they didn't suffer from, is that a vehicle could be the same amount of points, a land raider, for instance, to a monstrous creature, but unlike a monstrous creature, it was far more vulnerable to a single shot death. Now they mitigated this a little bit with 7th edition, where there was only one result on the vehicle damage chart that actually resulted in a wreck outside of AP2 or AP1, but it still meant that you could theoretically one-shot a vehicle, and that was just no good. It wasn't fun, especially for armies that are transport heavy. I mean, when was the last time you saw a Rhino rush or even a bunch of platoons in Chimeras? You just didn't really see it all that much, simply because you were investing points in a unit that could be taken out by one shot. And that's never good, especially at the shooting phase. So having a strength having a toughness and having wounds, really nice change for vehicles, turning them into more standard units. I think we're going to see them coming back onto the table a lot more. I think we're going to start seeing some variety in the armies that we can run as a result. So once again, I'm looking forward to seeing more of what they come out with for those rules, and seeing how it interacts with the game. There was a couple other unit stats that came out, not much that we're really going to go into, simply because what we've seen right now is more just tweaking what's out there existing. Guillemot, for instance, has been tweaked, so the stats you see in the Gathering Storm book is no longer what we're seeing on the actual field for his new rules. So I won't talk much about that one. The other thing I'm going to talk about is going to be weapons. Now, the first thing that I'm going to mention, and I'm sure there's going to be so many people happy about this one, is they have said D strength is gone. Take that as you will. I think that's good. I think D strength was, as many people would agree, D strength was bad for the game. It removed a lot of agency in the player. It was a way to remove units without your opponent having anything to do about it, and that's never good in the game. In video games, sure, whatever, but in tabletop games where there is a significant time investment as well as monetary investment, having a unit that could simply point at something you wanted to die and just have it removed from the table on a roll, that was way too much. So really glad to see D-strength removed in favor of, you know, maybe additional wounds or just more interactions with the strength toughness table or whatnot. So that's really good. Some of the other things we're seeing some weapons reimagined. The bolter, for instance. Well, I guess instead of saying the bolter, the AP chart it looks like it's no longer the same. It looks like we're moving back to a modifier base, which, again, this is something that I really like. I feel that it makes armor saves far more relevant in the game, whereas the way it's existed since, I can't remember if it was second or third that they removed modifiers, but having an AP value versus your armor save, and, you know, as anything that beat that armor save just completely negated the save, it was just, again, it wasn't very fun. It also meant that you saw a lot of power creep in the form of AP2 weaponry and whatnot. Like, we have more AP2 weapon, or at least more access to AP2 weapon now than ever, and it's ridiculous. It makes armies like Deathwing or Grey Knight Terminators just, it doesn't make them very viable simply because so many things can ignore their save. And once again, it's a factor of fun for both players on the table. So I'm really happy to see that. I'm really happy to see them go back to a modifier system, especially when you look at the las cannon, which has a modifier of -3. That's fantastic, because it means that a Terminator is still going to get a save against it. It's not as likely to pass it, but there's still that save. It means Armor 2 is still something to be feared, that even some of the heaviest weaponry out there is still going to be able to hurt it, but it's not an instant wound, which is really, really nice. So on one hand, you know, I could see some people complaining that this might slow the game down, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's going to speed things up, which is better for everyone involved. On that same note, we also see the notion of a heavy weapon causing multiple wounds. So the way it's looking, you know, you'll take your shot, you'll roll to wound, and then you'll see if the save goes through. And now I'm not sure if the D6 wounds on, say, the las cannon means you're going to have to take that save multiple times, or if it's going to operate like it kind of does right now, where if a wound causes multiple wounds, if you just save the one time and then the multiple ones go through if you fail. We'll see how that turns out. I'm hoping for that being the case, where if you fail to save, then you're taking the D6 wounds, as opposed to, you know, you're taking D6 wounds and all of a sudden you now have to roll, you know, 4 saves, 5 saves. So that's kind of my hope there. The other big thing is with this change of save modifiers and whatnot, we've seen a change to the workhorse of the bolter. The bolter no longer has any AP modifiers, which again is massive, because for the longest time the bolter ignored anything with armor save 5 or better, which basically said your basic guardsmen, your boy, many Tyranid gaunts, they just didn't get saves. You fired at them with a bolter, and as long as you wounded, you removed them. We now see a situation where these basic rank and file are getting saves. And sure, they're still not the greatest saves, but it means that the person on the receiving end of this is going to be able to interact with the game for a longer period of time. It's going to be able to decrease models on both sides of the table because you're possibly saving some stuff, and you know, and then be able to fire back. So really good change. I really like it. The other thing we saw was a change to flamers. Now, with the loss of templates, this was a question on a lot of people's minds. How are things like flamers going to work and other templates? And I think we pretty much have our answer here. The template is gone. However, we're seeing flamers cause D6 shots, which is absolutely fantastic. Or I guess in this case, D6 wounds, because it automatically hits. But this is massive for a couple of things. Like, one, you no longer have to try and position your flamers at the very front of the unit, which is great because it means they're not going to get sniped away anymore. But it also means you can fire over your unit, and it means that if you're at the furthest distance away from the unit, so you're at maximum range, you're still getting the opportunity to hit more than a single model. And this is massive. It's going to make the flamer a bit more of a workhorse in the game, I think, and it's going to make units like, say, Burner Boys, or dare I say it, the whatever that Tyranid creature that has the flame template. All of a sudden, I can't remember what it's called. Pyrovore, I think. or even Sisters of Battle. Like these models are going to become a lot more usable on the tables simply because they're not going to be hampered by their range. They're not going to be hampered by what sort of unit they're in. So fantastic for that. The other really neat thing about it is because it's an assault D6 weapon. Even if you do use a flamer on a single target, like a monstrous creature or a character or something like that, you're not doing just one hit. Like you might, but you have the ability to actually do up to the full 6 hits on it. So that's going to make flamers a lot more valuable in that regard as well. Anything to be able to make your opponent roll more dice. So again, a very exciting change. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes moving forward. So anyway, yeah, those were kind of the 3 big things we saw come out of this week, or at least that I saw. Now, granted, when I'm filming this, it's Thursday, so who knows what sort of stuff is going to pop out during the day or on Friday or whatnot. So this might not be comprehensively covering everything, but still, Games Workshop is still really really impressing me with what they're bringing out. They're making me more and more excited for this upcoming edition. We're seeing some really positive changes, and the fact that they're essentially writing the rules from the ground up, having used Age of Sigmar as their testing grounds, I'm really looking forward to it. I think we're going to have one of the healthiest game systems we've seen in 40k for a very, very long time. And that's something that anyone who loves this game, loves this community, should be excited about, should be happy about seeing. Because it means more people are going to feel comfortable coming into the game. They're not going to be scared away by this massive tome of rules. Especially with some contradicting things or with multiple iterations of the same rule in there. So just in general, these changes are really positive. I'm really looking forward to them, and I encourage everyone who might be seeing some doubt at this upcoming edition, like, please just wait, see what Games Workshop is coming out, give the rule set a chance before you make your decision on this, because again, like, these are great changes. These are things that are going to make the game better for everyone involved. So yeah, so that's my thoughts. Now, obviously, you're probably going to notice that this is the second time I've done a video like this. I am thinking about making it a little bit more regular, depending on what sort of material comes out. Just as long as I don't ramble too long on future topics and whatnot. I'm going to try and keep to maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that sort of thing. But of course, if you guys have questions, leave them in the comments below. That's something that I'm going to start doing if people want to start asking me questions. I don't know why. I don't know why anyone cares what I think, but if that's something you so choose. Additionally, if there's videos you want to see done, let me know. Obviously, battle reports are the big one that everyone wants to see, and like I said last time, I'm working on it. I'm trying to see what I can do there. But in the meantime, let me know what you guys think. I love the dialogue. I love the conversations. So leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Happy wargaming!